I changed my mind. They
for
can
at least
stay.
one more day.
All right.
Because we have events tomorrow, and we want them playing in that.
Yeah,
if
they
don't
can stay.
Make it easy.
All right. I'm willing to compromise. Sandsep Citadel is where Chris will start. You saw Riley start off with a Temple of Malady. Opulent Palace there for Riley. We'll head back Chris's way. Courser, fix the draw. That's Manic Influence. This is Sylvan Caryatid. That's a very important one for the 4-color mid-range deck.
Yep. Mana Acceleration because the deck is a little bit on the slow side, and Mana Fixing because not even Mana Confluence and Sandsep Citadel guarantees the deck can cast its spells.
Opulent Palace is the draw for Chris. Looks like he'll play a Courser. Take a look at the top card. Sandsep Citadel in the house. Trigger, gain a little bit of life. Courser getting to work. Top card is a Plains. Pass the turn back. Mana will not be an issue for Andersen this game.
Most likely. Not necessarily out of the woods, but he should be good.
It's a Thoughtseize. Solitaris is off to the side, along with the Siege Rhino, Satyr Wayfinder, Courser, and a Caryatid, along with that Opulent Palace. Solitaris, good in hand, good in the graveyard.
Siege Rhino is the card that stands out here, though if Riley has Disdainful Stroke, which there are 2 copies of in his main deck, perhaps he goes in a different direction. I think the rest of Chris's hand is so anemic here that it has to be Siege Rhino, even if he has a copy of Disdainful Stroke.
On the Rhino hit the bin, another Solitaris on top. Yes, there are 4 copies of Solitaris in the deck. And it's interesting because you want him in different spots. You'd like him in the graveyard, but you also like him in your hand and in play. It's just a card that is very, very good in all zones.
Yeah. I mean, Chris is getting to the spot now where he can just start casting these. You saw that get revealed there. You think the immediate instinct is, well, I'll mill this thing over. Maybe not. Maybe he's happy just to start drawing them. And in fact, it looks like he wants to take it as his draw step next turn instead of putting it in the graveyard with the Wayfinder.
And you saw him play Courser, play a land, trigger that, gain some life. Play another Caryatid, pass the turn back. Had the opportunity to cast Satyr Wayfinder if he wanted to, elected not to. Curran's going to play a Polluted Delta here. He'll gain a little bit of life. Top card of his deck is a Prognostic Sphinx. And he'll just pass the turn back over to Andersen, who's going to draw a copy of Solitaris. That makes 2 of them in his hand. Top card of the deck is a copy of Manic Influence. He will play that. Trigger, Coursers, gain some life. Top card, Siege Rhino. Not a bad place to be.
There is just a ton of raw power in this 4-color deck.
Yes. That's what makes this deck scary. The power of the deck is very, very high. And if the mana comes together appropriately, which I think has to be goal number 1 of the deck, is make sure the mana works. If that happens, your cards are through the roof.
I mean, this is a completely synergy-free opening from Chris. He's just accelerating into 6/6 Vigilance creatures, and it's going to be tough for Riley to keep up. When we saw Ken Kenner on camera with this deck, he was all doing all this crazy, I'll mill myself over, and Chris is not even bothering with that.
Yeah, he has, Kent, when we watched him earlier, he had SCGCOL going and Satyr Wayfinder and doing all this neat stuff and turning over cards. One of them will be a copy of Solitaris activated from the graveyard. And that's all well and good, but you can have draws like this as well that are just extremely powerful and put your opponent to the test right away.
Even if the souls aren't necessarily all-stars and constructed across the board, they're all pretty powerful once they're in play, you know? Say what you will about them compared to Titans, but when they're in play, they're still totally fine.
And I think, this might be a step in the right direction for the Soul Cycle. It makes sense seeing a lot of these in the main deck for this particular weekend and how the metagame is shaped up. Solitaris is a beating in all zones.
Yes.
You just spent the Hero's Downfall to kill it. Cool, I'll use it later.
Right.
That's fine. It's great against the Whip of Erebos decks, and it has the ability to just win a game against anyone. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we start to see more of that card and then other souls as a result. A card like Soul Chandelar, in the right metagame, can take over a game all by itself.
Yep.
I mean, we've already seen Soul of Innistrad a little bit as a one-of in the Whip of Erebos decks, and that plays a huge role in that matchup as well.
Soul of New Phyrexia could also be an insurance policy in certain matchups. Not that you would want 4 copies of that card, but possible that it's warranting sideboard slots.
There's the attack. And see, this is the best part about that Solitaris dying, is Chris can make this attack, and there's nothing Riley can do about it.
Yep.
Because at a moment's notice, as Riley blocks either of one of those creatures, Chris can say, okay, I'll use the Soul of Theros from my graveyard, give my creatures +2/+2, first strike and lifelink and all that jazz, and now you're in a world of trouble. Oh, by the way, here's another Soul of Theros. Now, Disdainful Stroke is all well and good, but the same problem presents itself.
They're still good in the graveyard.
Yeah.
And Chris can also just do other things with his mana if he doesn't feel like using the Soul Theros. It's just an option in his graveyard.
It basically makes it so that attacking is free now. Like Riley can't block profitably. Now, Parnassus Sphinx having 5 toughness certainly is nice in this situation. Here comes the Courser. Well, might as well attack because it certainly ain't blocking.
Yep, because Chris is also probably not attacking now because the Prognosis Sphinx is too big, even with the Soul Theros trigger.
Though, to be fair, Chris does have the ability here, as he'll reveal his top card, his copy of Elvish Mystic, to just say, yeah, attack with both, because Prognosis Sphinx isn't going to kill one of them.
Oh, sure, it's still a freebie.
Yeah, still pretty good turn. Though he may pump the brakes here, we'll see.
He also gets to do a lot of advancement to his board this coming turn here with Siege Rhino, Courser in hand, another Wayfinder. And there's a lot going on.
See Riley take a look at Soul Theros, wants to make sure he knows exactly how this thing works so he doesn't make a bad block. Or Chris is able to force through a little bit of damage. And you mentioned he's got a lot to do this turn. Siege Rhino being option A probably. Satyr Wayfinder potentially being option B. Maybe he can do all 3 depending on how things line up. Start by playing Courser, it looks like. Now there's a Rhino. For me, if I'm in Chris's spot there, I really have interest in playing Satyr Wayfinder because I don't have interest in drawing Elvish Mystic next turn.
I was about to make the exact same point. I think that Chris is better served there just casting the Wayfinder.
So I think you can lead with Wayfinder to influence your decision. If you find a land, you can play Courser. Play Courser, play land, play Rhino.
Unless Chris is just in a position where he's trying to get maximum power in play to set up the Soul Theroses, which I suppose there's an argument for, but I agree in principle. I think Elvish Mystic is far worse than his average draw on this stage.
The entire game revolves around Soul Theros. And 6 mana, exile from your graveyard. Creature you control get +2/+2 and gain first strike and lifelink until end of turn. So that text in the graveyard, yes, he can only do it once per turn, given how much mana he has in play, but it just plays such a huge role.
And there's only so many times you need to do that sort of thing when you have Siege Rhino and friends in play before, your opponent can't keep up.
Here's a Courser there for Curran. He'll just pass the turn back. Andersen will draw a copy of Elvish Mystic. Oh, look, a Soul Theros on top of his deck. I like this deck.
Maybe that's the reason that Chris wants to draw Elvish Mystic in this spot. Is it something that allows him to both Soul Theros and cast something in the same turn? And because Riley's in a position where he has to start blocking, Chris's hand's going to be forced on the Soul Theros. He's just going to have to activate it. So maybe just any 1-mana spell is better than the average draw from Chris's perspective.
Just keep adding more to the board?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, here are some blocks. And what this does here, too, is it just forces Riley's hand a bunch of times. And Chris is just basically saying, well, you know what I'm going to do. Can you beat it? I'm not entirely convinced that you can. And Riley's life total is already kind of low. He's at 12 right now. These creatures are just going to get bigger and better. Not to mention, Chris is going to gain a whole bunch of life, which means he gets more draw steps over the course of the game.
Yeah, I mean, Riley can try to block in such a way where enough of his stuff dies, where the dig through time becomes more efficient, and maybe he can try to set up spells in multiple turns, but it's just hard to weather the storm of what's happening right now.
And 6 mana. There is Soul Theros. Trigger. A bunch of stuff's going to happen. Chris is going to gain a bunch of life, going to take care of quite a few creatures on the other side of the table. One thing to keep in mind, too, is when you're playing against a deck like Soul Tide Control, you don't have to worry about an hostilities or some sort of wrath effect. You are more than happy to just kind of extend onto the board.
Yeah.
Crux of Fate is not here yet, though it is coming with Fate Reforged. Top card we turned down. That's an Ashiok, mind you. Here's a Dig Through Time.
Yeah, that's why Riley blocked the way that he blocked. He was trying to pursue the types of blocks that would allow him to save the most life total, put both the Coursers in the graveyard, so he'd be able to dig with the leftover mana this turn and try to do something big on his next turn. But that's just going to be hard to do. Again, these two decks are playing by very different rules right now.
All right, list of 7, takes 2 with him. He's got a Prognostic Sphinx and a Carry-At-It out there, but that's it. Chris will take a look at Riley's graveyard while Riley will work in his first main phase. and he's going to pack his permanents up. Chris Anderson's going to win game number 1 here over Riley Curran. 4-color mid-range up a game here over Sultai Control, and you mentioned it, they are not playing the same game of Magic there.
No, and Chris didn't even do anything that dramatic with his graveyard. It's not like those Soul Theros were really getting milled over. It was more that they got cast and countered and killed. And Riley wasn't able to put enough pressure on Chris there to avoid the game getting to a spot where Chris was just able to maximize a lot of power out of his copies of Soul Theros.
Sideboard time. We will start with Curran and his Sultai Control deck.
4 copies of Drown in Sorrow, an Unravel of the Aether, 2 copies of Bioblight, a Sultai Charm, a Hornet Queen, a Liliana Vest, 2 copies of Dissolve, a Disdainful Stroke, a Kiora the Crashing Wave, and a Negate. I think just some of the basic anti-control cards are fine here, but even they are not very attractive here given the nature of Chris's deck. Normally, Unravel the Aether would be very powerful against a Graveyard Central strategy with Whip of Erebus. Here, not that many targets in Chris's list. I think the Negate and this Disdainful Stroke they're okay, but again, Chris can operate with a lot of cheap permanents, and putting his expensive stuff in the graveyard isn't necessarily very good for Riley. So I like the Kiora, I like the 2 Dissolves, but past that, there's not a lot of great tools in the sideboard.
And we're going to take a look at 2 Glare of Heresies, 2 Treasure Cruises, 3 Drown in Sorrows, 2 Disdainful Stroke of Thoughtseize, 2 Negates of Banishing Light, a Suspension Field, and a copy of Pharika, God of Affliction. A lot of stretching of the mana here, obviously, so that means that you have a lot of options that other decks wouldn't have. I mean, for example, you've got Pharika side-by-side with Suspension Field, side-by-side with Treasure Cruise as far as options are concerned. Plenty of good ones available.
I really like the Pharika in this matchup because Riley's deck is not very good against Death Touch. He has, or a lot of Death Touch creatures, rather. He has Kiora, he has Prognostic Sphinx, he has Corsair Krufix, Sylvan Caryatid. These are good at blocking, but not really 1/1 Death Touch tokens. So I think that's good to bring in here. The counter spells, the Thoughtseize, and the 2 copies of Treasure Cruise are very good here as well.
Really like the options available here for Andersen, so we'll see how he wants to shift things around. Curran is certainly in a bad spot right now, trying to make day 2, but we'll see if he can overcome it as these players will finish sideboarding up. We will talk about deck building, and nobody knows more about that than Patrick Chapin, Next Level Magic, back in 2015.
Hall of Famer, recent Worlds runner-up, Pro Tour champion this year, here with an updated version of his very successful, very popular book, Next Level Magic, with updated examples, updated cards, just a kind of a polishing up of the version for 2015. It's been sold out in paperback for a very long time now, close to a year, so if you've been waiting for it to come out in paperback, there's an up-to-date version. Also available on ebook as well. StarCityGames.com/NLM. You can order your copy today.
Game number 2 here for Andersen and Curran. 2 friends who have played on the Open Series for some time now. Chris kind of making his return back to Magic. He's kind of gone in and out of the game over the past year and a half, but Columbus not too far here from Indy. It's a drive that I've made many times during college, about 3.5 hours, 3 if you're feeling a little frisky.
Sure. Yeah, Chris is kind of a fickle beast when it comes to how much Magic he's playing. Sometimes he's very in, sometimes he's on hiatus, but has been showing up to more events periodically over the last couple months than he has in the years previous.
Look, it's adorable when people try to quit. I've tried to.
Right. Who are you kidding?
Don't run from who you are.
No one quits.
Get out there, cast your spells, get the job done. That's what I say. And that's exactly what he's doing right now.
You know how many times Osa Lovadovic quit Magic before he won his Pro Tour?
I'm afraid to find out.
You know how many times he sold his collection to the local store?
No.
Several. Several times. He kept his copy of Renounced Bargain so he could play in Type 2 tournaments at the store and sold everything else.
Nice.
Several times.
I sold my collection a few times when I was a kid. I showed the world. I sold those Phyrexian Scudas.
Good thing you did.
Yeah, they were pretty bad.
One of Magic's very few cards that has not appreciated in value.
A Temple of Malady will start things off.
If your portfolio was flush with Hernan Dijins, Ali from Cairo,
Chris with a very painful Elvish Visionary.
Blazing Spectre.
Elvish Mystic. Oh, there he is.
Oh, yeah.
You know I paid that kicker.
Yep, this is R&D saying this is as good as we can make a creature.
Kicker, pay 3 life. It's a 5/5. All right, terminate it. Come on.
Terminate? If you're lucky, more like repulse. Or exclude.
I get to cast it again? Really?
You're too generous.
What a deal.
You're gonna try again.
Little Thoughtseize action here from Chris. You'll see a Prognostic Sphinx, a Kiora, Disdainful Stroke among the options.
Dig Through Time, Courser, some solid cards here in Riley's hand.
Yeah.
Hard hand to poke a hole in.
Chris going to consult his hand. You see he has a Courser. He has a Sidisi, a Soul. Also has a Siege Rhino too.
I almost feel like Courser is really the standout card in this hand. Riley's short on mana, and his hand has so much need to tap out that the counterspell may not be very good.
And Chris kind of separating things now, what he may want to take.
If Chris has a way to kill the Courser, that's very different.
Yeah.
But if he does not, I think Courser is the card that I would take out of this hand. Depends on the specifics of Chris's hand, but it's the card that stands out to me.
It looks like he's coming to that conclusion. It's very clear the cards here, he's most scared of are Cure and Courser. It feels like to me, Cure is a card that could go ultimate against him pretty easily.
That's true. I mean, if his hand's on the slow side, that's definitely a concern.
Citadel, here's an attack for 1. We'll pass the turn back over to Riley. So basically what Chris is saying is I'm not afraid of the incremental advantage that you can generate with Courser. I think I can overcome that.
Or he's saying if he taps out this turn for a Courser, it essentially turns off the Disdainful Stroke, which allows me to resolve Siege Rhino. And Riley's hand's not that well suited to handle Siege Rhino without the Kiora. So there's a couple different lines of play here.
Curran going to search up an island there off the polluted Delta. He's got all 3 colors of mana at this point. And you have to imagine his Courser of Crifix will be coming down here in just a moment. And there it is, top card of the deck here in just a second. That is a Disdainful Stroke. We are heading back Andersen's way. Andersen will draw cards, copy of Sylvan Caryatid. There's a Courser. Somebody's looking for a land, did not have an untapped one. So, Sidisi is not a land. All you can do is pass the turn back. Part of the consequence of playing 22 of them.
Yep. I mean, part of it is more creatures in the deck are necessary to enable Sidisi and other graveyard cards. So it's there's a lot of different masters that are trying to be served here.
Well, Riley missed his land drop. However, Chris found his. And we made Rock out of nowhere. Just another card he gets to play. 3 copies of that.
Sure, whatever.
I just play whatever I want. Who cares about the mana?
Just do whatever you want.
Look, if I get to cast my spells, you can't win. That's the approach that this 4-color mid-range deck is taking. And I like this play here by Andersen. Had the ability to cast a card like Sidisi or Siege Rhino, but he knows that Curran does have Disdainful Stroke now. The draw was a Sylvan Caryatid for the turn. There's a Swamp. Caryatid actually pretty big, along with finding a land there too, because now Riley has the ability to actually play Caryatid and leave up Disdainful Stroke.
Though still, you know, Chris is kind of playing this game where if we want to stare at each other for a while, I'm going to have a huge edge. My deck's more powerful. I have Courser in play unchecked, so, you know, I can also get to 8 mana and start casting multiple spells in one turn.
Now it's time to come out with a Haymaker. So he's going to cast Sidisi into the graveyard. Just like you should, because that's exactly where it's going. And we will go back Curran's way. And that's just the thing where you just get that part of the game over with. You know it's not resolving, so.
Exactly. I think if Chris had hit a land drop that turn, maybe he still holds for a little bit longer to try to set up 2 spells in one turn. But as things stand, you know, your hand's getting bottlenecked here. There's no guarantee you have mana next turn. Just kind of have to do it.
Courser comes down for Riley. He'll pass the turn back over to Andersen. Murderous Cut is Chris's draw. Windswept Teeth going to come into play very quickly from the Courser. So a little bit of life gain there for Chris. Solitaros on top of the deck. There's also Solitaros in the hand, along with the Wingmate Rock, a Treasure Cruise, another copy of Sidisi, a Siege Rhino, an Ancestral Recall, Time Walk.
Black Lotus.
Yep, just whatever you want to cast.
Big Furry Monster. A lot of really powerful plays here for Chris.
Oddly enough, no Phyrexian Scuda.
Didn't quite make the cut.
Decided to cut that one. It was too easy to cast. Here's an attempt at Sidisi. A bit of a combo when there's a creature on top of your deck, especially Soul of Theros. So that's going to turn over a couple of cards. Thoughtseize on top of the deck now as well. Zombie token coming in. So here that comes.
And you can see it's just, Riley kind of has to be the beatdown in the matchup with no sweepers in the deck. And his deck with 3 Prognostic Sphinxes and 4 copies of Courser Crufix to attack with can't really position himself as a beatdown deck.
Definitely not.
He is getting overwhelmed. The discrepancy in power level between these 2 decks is very high. and it's hard for Riley to take a different position in the matchup.
This is the Thoughtseize. Well, he's got quite a few options to choose from. Wingmate Rocks.
Okay.
Soul of Theros, Treasure Cruise, Murderous Cut, Siege Rhino. I would roll a die.
Yeah. I would thought he's being drawn next turn.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah, this matchup is, and I think Riley knows that. This matchup is very, very difficult for him to win. This is not a deck that can be controlled through traditional means.
Yep. You have to kill them fast or attack their mana somehow.
Yeah.
But just playing a game of let's see whose draw steps are better is not going to be good.
And it's not even, Riley's deck isn't really a deck that can take advantage of Chris maybe stumbling on mana for a little while.
Yeah, he has no tempo here. Really the only thing that he can run away with is his Planeswalkers. 3 copies of Ashiok and a Kiora, plus another Kiora on the sideboard, gives him some hope of just, I have a fast Planeswalker, I can protect it, that's good enough to win the game.
That's part of the reason I think we saw Chris take the Kiora, because he knows that's one of the few ways that he can lose. Kiora starts making Krakens, and now Chris can't really catch up in that. See the hand here for Curran, a Hero's Downfall, Prognostic Sphinx, Disdainful Stroke, and Dig Through Time.
This is not a bad hand, but again, these 2 decks are playing by very different rules.
So we'll see what the selection will be here in just a moment.
I mean, I think honestly there's an argument for Dig Through Time out of this hand, even though there's 3 other powerful options. Just because if I'm in Chris's position, I'm thinking, I don't feel like I can lose this game unless Riley gets a huge card advantage over me and then can convert that into more resources than I have.
Sure.
Like if he gets a counter spell, kill a creature, cast a Prognostic Sphinx, I just don't respect those lines of play enough.
And that's completely fair.
Yeah. I don't mind taking the Disdainful Stroke either because Chris's hand is bottlenecked with expensive stuff, but, you know. I think the Hero's Downfall and the Prognostic Sphinx, though powerful Magic cards, just don't mean enough.
See what else Andersen's up to this turn. A lot to think about when you have this many powerful cards in your hand and in your deck. Just how you want to sequence things out.
Once again, players from the Legacy and Modern Challengers.
Start by sacrificing Windswept. He does not want to draw Seder Wayfinder, so time to get a Forest or Plains out of the deck. Want to make sure you get the right land given the mana base of this deck. He will go with a Forest, so we'll see the top part of his deck in just a moment here from Corsair.
Again, just not a lot of real substantial cards in Riley's deck at this stage of the game. There's some Planeswalkers left, a Horniqueen if you left it in.
Siege Rhino on top of Andersen's deck. There's a Treasure Cruise, sure. Absolutely. Conveniently leaving Soul of Theros as the last card.
Sure.
Siege Rhino is 1. Disdainful Stroke is 2. Siege Rhino is 3.
Oh boy.
We'll have to see the top part of the deck now for Corsair. Sylvan Carry added. Bunch of mana here now. What card to cast? The Rhino. Chris knows it's in there. It can get killed via Hero's Downfall, but the damage may already be done there from the big fella.
And just look at Chris's hand.
Yeah, it's a joke. It's so good.
Riley with a shaking of the head.
Yeah. I mean, how's he supposed to keep up with this? Hero's Downfall, kill your Sidisi, sure. Now here's Dig Through Time. That's a great card. Don't get to see that one just
Right.
yet. You do get to see it after Dig Through Time resolves, though.
Yeah, there's all this weird nuance with Corsair. But basically, cards that are being drawn get revealed, but cards that you are looking at.
supposed to not.
Unless it's the top card of your deck, like with a Scry.
Yeah. Tough choice here for Riley. Hero's Downfall's not a bad start. But what you take after that is a good question.
I think Riley's plan here has to be take the cards that buy him the time to find Planeswalkers.
Sure.
I just don't see of another route that allows him a chance to win the game. But now with Kiora, that's kind of the starting point. Silence the Believers is well on top of the deck now. That might give him the breathing space to do something significant.
Chris does have a disdainful stroke in his hand. How he wants to use it is the big question. There is Kiora, and that can play a big role in things, as Riley will minus it and draw a card. Windswept Heath will come in as the land. Take a look at the top card, Hero's Downfall. So he's working his way towards something. What felt like a runaway, Curran is trying to work himself back into. Gonna sacrifice his Windswept Heath. Lose a little, gain some.
I mean, these are not bad turns that Riley's having right now.
For sure.
He's mana efficient. He's doing some powerful stuff.
And it really gets hairy once Chris gets into 2 spell per turn territory.
Yeah, and he's basically there.
Dig through time on top. Something else to work towards. And a passing of the turn. We're going back Andersen's way. He'll draw Sylvan Carry added. Top card. Elvish Mystic. And for me, and we talked about this when Ken played, that's the only real red herring in the deck, is the Mystic. Just a situation where I think Chris would love if that was a land right now.
Yeah, there's the tension with that and Sidisi.
Yeah.
You know, you want a certain critical mass of creatures. And also, when Soul of Theros is in your deck, you just want to have the board clogged up with just random creatures. But I agree there. It does seem attractive to try to add more lands to the deck.
But the power level of this deck, of course, just through the roof. But what's also really compelling about this is just, I mean, we're into, what, our 3rd month of the standard format now? 3.5 months in? And you're still able to build something like this? And this format is certainly not solved, and we have a new set coming.
Yeah. Yeah, people are still... I feel like Kiora has been all but absent from the metagame until very recently, where it's showing up all over the place.
See what Andersen wants to deploy here. It'd be pretty easy just to say, I'll play a Rhino, leave up Disdainful Stroke, pass the turn back, and looks like that's the route he's going to go.
Well, he knows he's playing against Silence the Believers and Dig Through Time, so I think leaving up the Disdainful Stroke, if he can help, it's really good for him.
So he wants to tap his mana to cast this. He will go about doing it that way. We'll pay a little now to gain some life. Curran will get drained a little bit. But I think he's got to hold a Disdainful Stroke for a little while here. Top card here, Aether Spouse. Interesting. Well, it's better to know that's there. How about that?
Yeah.
Gonna tick up the old Kiora here. Because running face first in the spouts is, boy, is it ugly. And the Rhino got locked down by Kiora. Of course, we're on top of Chris's deck here.
Kind of an awkward spot here. And that
Yeah.
Aether Spout's maybe the more threatening card than the Dig Through Time or the Silence the Believers. If that's the case, Riley does have a shot here of kind of working his way back into the game. And yeah, Chris just in the market for more mana. We're settling into kind of an awkward game here.
I mean, it's a long game.
Yeah.
It's a long game that we felt favored Chris, and it potentially still does. But it's definitely a long game that we're working our way into here.
I think Kiora is a real path to victory here for Riley. That's the one card he had left in his deck. If he brought in the one copy of Liliana Vess, it could be much the same thing. It's a route to an ultimate which might be powerful enough to win the game.
The only thing to keep in mind here, with dig through time, you don't reveal the cards, so Chris won't know if Riley took Aether Spouts or not. We will, but Chris won't, and so he'll probably have to play around that accordingly. Temple Mystery the draw, Temple Mystery on top of the deck. Temple will come in. Of course, we'll gain some life, trigger the scry, take a look, dig through time. Tough to pass that one up.
Yeah, I mean, he's at the point now where even drawing dig through time for full retail is not a bad deal because Chris is not doing very much that taxes Riley's mana.
Yeah, Chris has to do a lot of setup over the next couple of turns, it feels like. Get to a stage where Soul of Theros is a real backbreaker.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, Riley can do something like this, which is move towards Planeswalkers. Here's Ashiok now. Courser, Stroke, Citadel, top card, Wingmate Rock.
Not shabby.
Not at all. Treasure Cruise next.
It's crazy to say that Chris is choked on mana at this stage of the game, but he very much is.
And Chris right now with 4 lands in play and then 4 accelerants. So he does have access to 8 mana.
He also wants to leave up Disdainful Stroke.
Yeah, so that means he, in theory, only has access to 6 mana.
I mean, it is a bit of a freebie here for Chris to say attack with the Siege Rhino to just trigger Raid, because it doesn't take damage on the way back because of the Kiora trigger.
Mm-hmm. Oh, looks like he may have found that. You see, until your next turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to and dealt by target permanent opponent controls. So in a roundabout way, he can't actually activate Raid,
Yeah.
which I generally kind of like. Yeah, yeah. Chris says not exactly. Chris is gonna help him with his card. Such a nice guy. And now here is a Wingmate Rock.
I think after that hesitation, Chris is double checking to see if it explicitly calls out players or planeswalkers
or something.
Somehow accepted, but
Now that Rhino doesn't get to do anything except trigger the raid on Wingmate Rock, so Chris can go to the skies. So now he's got 2 3/4 flyers with the Stroke still available. So yeah, that's the new plan. We'll see. He's got to overcome some planeswalkers now, and he wants to get those planeswalkers off the table.
and I think now Riley has a plan here where he can try to just leave up Aether Spouts plus Dissolve, which is going to make it really hard for Chris to touch his planeswalkers.
Yeah.
And go ultimate with Kiora and or Ashiok.
It's not a bad plan. Ashiok's going to turn over a couple more cards here. And take a look at what's on top of Riley's deck. Is that an Apex Predator?
Oh, yeah.
That's a fun of if I've ever seen one. It's got a lot of text.
Oh, yeah.
And a very text-heavy game that we are currently playing here between these two.
Although Gark is arguably less powerful than Kiora in this spot. Still not a bad draw step. I mean, I'm sure Riley will take it. Except that he may be forced to just hold up Aether Spouts plus Dissolve this whole time.
Yeah.
So,
He might not ever be able to just say, I'll tap 7 mana to do this. Also, Chris has a Stroke in his hand as well. So.
Yeah, or Riley might have to wait until he has some exorbitant sum of mana to be able to set this all up.
Yeah, this is just such a complicated board state for both players. It's fun to watch them try to navigate it. Both players coming at a lot of different angles now. Chris coming from the sky. You know, he's got some interesting cards in his hand. He has Soul Theros in his graveyard and in his hand. Riley has a bunch of cards in his hand. Dig Through Time kind of looming. Garrick on top of it. Kiora just locked down a Wingmate Rock. Ashiok is at 7. So coming from a lot of different angles here. Curran is the draw. Soul Theros on top of the deck.
Somehow Chris still with 4 lands in play.
Yeah, very strange. Does only play 22, but it's time to get attacking now. And even though Kiora did lock down Wingmate Rock, it is a pretty smart attack to make here because you do get the trigger and gain some life.
Exactly. And, you know, Chris is now trying to get the game in a position where I was going to say attack in such a fashion where he can bleed out the Aether Spouse without losing everything. It appears that perhaps that's not the case.
Well, it's an interesting situation, I think. Where, one, he might be okay getting spotted. Two, he might think his defense of Disdainful Stroke is good enough against this. Which I think we know is not the case. Because Riley is ready here with Spouts and Dissolve. Aether Spouts could be very nasty in this board position.
Yep. I mean, with Counterspell backup is a big game.
Yeah, that's the one thing that Chris didn't see, is the Counterspell backup. He saw the Spouts from a Courser, but he didn't see the Dissolve. And we have seen Riley play this deck before when we've come over to the Midwest, and he's had some deep runs with it, and he does like his Dissolves in his deck. Looks like he's going to do some blocking here. Perhaps the best place to start is just by casting Aether Spouts first before blocking. Make sure you win the war.
Well, is Riley without quadruple blue?
That might be the case. Oh no. Oh wow.
I just assumed he must have had quadruple
So
blue.
many lands in
Yeah,
play.
he does not. A lot of swamps and a lot of forests. So he might have to do something like silence the Believers this turn to keep his Planeswalker alive.
There's a soul. Well, things got a little awkward here now, didn't it? And there is Silence the Believers. It'll be Strived. Is it Striven?
Strove? I'm not super sure.
Twitter, that's what you're there for.
Yeah, this is pretty rough for Riley that he did not have access to quadruple blue.
I know for sure it's Stroke. This is the Disdainful variety. That'll take care of Silence the Believers, and Curran's inability to have double blue on this particular turn, quadruple blue total, which he will have next turn, it looks like. Well, he's going to have to lose the Sylvan Caryatid, so that doesn't even look to be the case. So Soul Theros, along with a bunch of creatures, will gain a boatload of life and get some work done on this board.
And now Riley is without copies of Kiora left in his deck. He's only got 2 that he can side into, so.
And one thing we can't forget as well is you're not going to find a Wrath effect here.
Yep.
That's not going to happen in Sultai. I know he's got Garrick Apex Predator, but you're not going to find any Garrick's Wake or any of that stuff. Thoughtsy's the top card of the deck, Garrick the draw.
Aether Spouts is supposed to be his proxy for that, but at this point, Chris has gotten ahead enough on the board where he doesn't have to attack directly into the jaws of Aether Spouts. He can kind of send in half of his squad or
Riley going to turn over some cards here.
some percentage of his squad. Good enough to apply pressure without Aether Spouts really mattering all that much.
Actually, I turned over a Soul Theros among other things, but Chris just has another Soul Theros on top of his deck. So life is good here for the 4-color mid-range player.
And all the other big plays in his hand commit so much mana that he loses access to either Aether Spouts or Dissolve or both.
Soul Theros the draw. Top card, Opulent Palace. Land number 5. How sweet it is. Forest coming up next. And again, he's just got to be careful, I think, does Andersen, of just worrying about Spouts.
Yeah, I mean, he can start just attacking with his creatures that only have comes into play triggers, for example.
Sure.
Or the Corsair that doesn't really care about at this point, but leave things like the Wingmate Rock token back and the Zombie token back, and only attack with those on turns where Riley does not have access to Aether Spouts.
Some attacking is going to take place. We'll see with how much. Looks like he's comfortable enough to shove in here. Gonna leave the zombie back on defense, but there is also a courser on the other side of the table, so it does make sense.
Also, Chris probably feels like this is good enough of attack to warrant the use of Aether Spouts, and there's no reason to throw the zombie in there for no reason.
Sure. I think Curran wants to see exactly how this is going to work with Aether Spouts, because Wingmate Rock, when it attacks, the trigger is on the stack. And then he says, okay, if I spouts with the trigger in the stack, when Wingmate Rock resolves, it says you gain 1 life for each attacking creature. Well, there won't be any attacking creatures there. So Aether Spouts should effectively counter that line of text.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Riley's asking right now to the table spotter. So there is Aether Spouts, the card we've been talking about for some time now. For each attacking creature, its owner puts it on the top or bottom of his or her library, their choice. It'll take care of tokens no matter what. But now Chris gets to decide, okay, am I happy drawing some of these actual cards, or I can just put them to the bottom and draw the forest?
And I question whether or not Chris really needed to send in the Wingmate Rock token here. It feels like attacking with Siege Rhino, Courser, and Wingmate Rock is probably good enough to get the Aether Spouts out of hand. And if it doesn't, then that's fine. You deal a bunch of damage that turn.
Perhaps it was a touch aggressive.
I mean, it's close, but I feel like he's probably doing enough without sending in the token. But like we've been mentioning a couple times, this is a really complicated game.
And also, I think it's a situation right where he just needs to get, I can agree with you about holding back the token because you don't want to lose that, but it's a situation where Chris is just saying, I have to plow through this Aether Spouts now. I have done that. Now I can put this monster on the table.
Oh, overall, I like the philosophy of trying to make a big attack that turn. I'm in agreement.
Okay.
I just think his attack was probably big enough without the Wingmate Rod token.
Sure. There's another carry added. Pass the turn back. Curran on tap. Thoughtseize is the draw. Top card is the Thoughtseize. Ashiok ticking up. So Chris put all those cards on top, and now Riley gets to get them. So big smile on his face. Perhaps Chris may have missed that interaction. More options there for Curran. It's funny, these two players just know each other very, very well. They worked on Elves together for almost a year. They've been playing the same PTQs for a long time.
Now this copy of Ashiok's quite threatening.
Yes. Thoughtseize among the 7 cards here that Curran's going to take a look at. Prognosis Sphinx, another copy of Aether Spouts. Okay.
I mean, the second Aether Spouts here is huge. As you mentioned, these guys are friends, but Chris may not be intimately familiar with Riley's list. And someone might play around the first Aether Spouts, but they're not going to play around the second copy that often.
That doesn't happen. The real thing is what's ticking down in the middle here. We're about to be under 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Andersen up a game.
Riley's got to be able to win this game just to get to a draw.
Yeah.
And at 7 minutes and clicking here with not that much pressure in play or in deck, and an opponent at 42 life, it's going to be tough.
I don't think we're going to have time for a third one. Or at least I'd be very surprised if we did.
No, I'm not getting that vibe from either of these decks.
There's the grip for Andersen. Siege Rhino, Soul Theros, and a Murderous Cut. The Rhino's going to bite the dust. And back to Andersen, we're going to go. So Andersen will draw a card. Top card will not be revealed. No Courser in play anymore. He'll draw a Forest that he knew was there. So that's going to come into play. I think Soul Theros is probably clear for takeoff here.
Seems like a safe enough attack. The
Those
question,
Elvis Mystics too, perhaps.
The question just is if this is the spot where Chris wants to use the Murderous Cut he's been sitting on for a while.
Sure.
And then does he play around the second Aether Spouts?
Well, taking a look at Riley's mana base, he won't have to this turn.
Oh yeah, the whole
the blue thing has come up again. Courser's going to bite the dust. Ashiok's going to get turned face down off the top of his deck.
Yeah, it's easy to get in this mentality once we've hit the point where players have 8 lands in play and they've cast Dig Through Time 4 times. where Colored Manta is something that isn't on our radar anymore. But for Riley, it's been strangely relevant this game over some pretty late turns.
Not only is it our assumption that he can cast these spells, it might be Rye's assumption that he can say, I can cast Aether Spouts this turn. Potentially. Christian, I forgot how he wants to attack. I'd want to get that Ashiok off the board if I could.
Yeah, but he has enough mana left over here to activate his Soul Theros, so he can split this up however he wants to, play around, let's say, one piece of removal, and try to deal a lot of damage to Riley all in the same turn.
Yeah.
So the division on this attack is fairly complicated.
Yeah, it looks like Ashiok's going to bite it. See what Chris wants to follow up with. How about another Soul Theros?
Sure, why not?
It's the last card in Andersen's hand at this point. Doesn't seem like a bad spot to be in. Yeah, this. He'll take a little bit of damage to cast it. Looks like it's in. And back to Curran we're going to go. He'll untap Will Riley. He's got blue mana now. Ashiok to draw.
You see Hornet Queen in Riley's hand, but that's not even really castable.
Yeah, not on this board. Soul Theros is the trump. Wingmate Rock, Satyr Wayfinder, Sansep Citadel. And we'll go back to Andersen. Now, the big question. Will he play around the second copy of Aether Spouts?
I mean, this is absolutely an opportunity for Riley to get back in the game here if Chris is a little sloppy with the attacks.
There's a commune. Let's take a look. Sidisi among them. So Sidisi will go to the grip. The tough thing here is, you know, do you want to cast Sidisi? You probably want to attack first. But it is a little bit dangerous.
I'm really curious to see if Chris knows about a second Aether Spouts or if it's, you know, something he's playing around regardless, if he's familiar with Riley's list.
Yeah, he did not know about a second Aether Spouts.
Yeah, that is not the face of a person who knew about the second copy.
Yep. Those are going to go to the bottom. That's going to go away for good. You can see the frustration.
Yep.
There's Sidisi. Turn over a couple of cards. He's going to get a zombie. He'll pass the turn back.
Again, still not terrible shape here for Chris, but, you know, losing the Elvish Mystics now with the Soul Theros is in his graveyard, that's a real cost.
Yeah. And Soul Theros no longer being in play. I mean, that's you have one less 6/6 Vigilance in play.
Yes.
And what's really tough here for Riley is that this is a game that I think with enough time he would be able to turn around, because now he's got a Hornet Queen in play. He's got an Ashiok out there. Chris has just lost his board to Aether Spouts. 3 cards are being turned over. But I'm not convinced he's got enough time to get it done now. Especially with Andersen here at 41.
Yeah, he's gained so much life, and
He's going to gain more.
Riley still needs to be playing defense too.
Now, deck size is deck size could be a thing here. Interesting.
But now this is big time trouble. I mean, Riley's got this thing completely flipped around. And it's that second Aether Spouts that did it all.
Yeah. So right now, because these players moved to the future match area, got about 6 minutes and 30 seconds left on the clock. Might be enough, maybe, for Riley to come back here. And wow, well, this is very surprising. I suppose,
I think Chris knows he's dead.
yeah, that he's gonna get milled out too quickly, because at that point with Chris at 41, that's not his actual life total. His life total is how many cards he has left in his deck.
Yeah, you can see Chris a little frustrated. I mean, there was a lot of different opportunities for him to play different ways that game. Probably could have been a little bit more concerned about the potential for a second copy of Aether Spouts there. And, you know, it's one of those games where if you're in Chris's seat, it looks like you just can't lose the whole way. You have so much power in your hand. You have disdainful strokes. You have, I mean, a lot going on.
He felt ahead the whole way.
It's one of those games where you feel like you're sort of just playing out the stretch. You know, you have it locked up. And Riley just had the right mixture of weird cards there that was able to get him out of that spot and then flip the game around very quickly.
And you see these players shuffle up very quickly for game number 3 because they know they've only got about 5 minutes left to play. Andersen's going to keep his hand, as will Curran. But from a game that looked like it was very much in Andersen's hands, all of a sudden we're playing a third game. We've got about 5 minutes to finish it in. So a huge change in things. And it only took about 30 seconds.
Yeah. And you can see just sort of like the looseness that Chris had and, you know, how much amusement he had when he finally found the land off of course. Or he had very loose body language at the table. I think if you asked him in that moment, what do you think your odds of winning the game are, he would have said some very high number.
Yeah. Satyr Wayfinder. Couple of cards, Soul Theros among them. He'll get to take a Mana Confluence with him. Murderous Cut, Sylvan Curran also turned over. We'll go back Curran's way. Curran with a Disdainful Stroke available. Not going to need it this turn, but probably on the next one. Temple of Malady puts the top card to the bottom. We'll head back to Andersen. Opulent Palace the draw. An attack for 1 is simple. Opulent Palace will come in. We'll go back to Curran. It's 19-0. Temple, top card. Becomes the bottom card. Disdainful Stroke at the ready. Back to Andersen. Elvish Mystic the draw. Here's an attack for 1. Mana Confluence, Mystic, pass. 2 copies of Wingmate Rock in hand along with the Soul Theros. There's a land, passing of the turn. Andersen will draw. Disdainful Stroke.
And Chris's hand's just pretty low in power right now. I mean, having the Soul Theros in the graveyard is very nice, but, you know, he's not putting on a ton of pressure, and this is the type of hand that's very susceptible to Disdainful Stroke.
Yep, and that's going to take care of the Wingmate Rock.
To repeat myself from the previous round, please do not
Courser the draw.
otherwise inappropriately determine the outcome of a match.
See if Riley wants to deploy a Courser here or not.
Please do not roll a die, flip a coin, play another format. Anything unrelated to playing in your standard match today.
So there's a Courser. Top card is Courser. Curran's going to sacrifice his Pluto Delta. He'll lose 1, gain 1. So net neutral.
Certainly does not want a second Courser and definitely wants a shot at another land this turn.
Absolutely. There's Island. He will shuffle quickly and we'll see what he's able to find. Three minutes to go. Top card, Thoughtseize. Swamp. That'll be the land for the turn. Representing Disdainful Stroke yet again. We'll go back to Andersen. Andersen will draw. Sidisi's not bad. Does give him the ability to cast that spell and leave up Disdainful Stroke.
I also don't think that he just wants to run one of his creatures into a Courser to try to trigger raid on a card that might get countered anyway.
Yeah. Andersen will have to take 1 to cast it. See if it resolves. It will. There's a creature in Satyr Wayfinder and Sidisi, so zombie token going to come in. Pass the turn back. 2 minutes to go. Dig through time on top. Curran's deck. Thoughtseize was the draw. Curran likely trying to set up Aether Spouts yet again. Here's Thoughtseize. Disdainful Stroke, Soul Theros, and a Wingmate Rock.
I feel like this has to be, almost just has to be Disdainful Stroke because of how powerful the Aether Spouts is in hand.
Yep.
It feels like it's almost Riley's entire game plan.
It may not be a game-winning plan, but it could be a game-drawing plan, and that might be good enough.
Yeah, who knows? Again, we don't exactly know what the tiebreaker situation is like.
Of course, you're going to come in, gain another life, pass the turn back. Andersen will draw. Carry at it is what he's picked up for the turn.
This feels like he's potentially sacrificing some pretty big inroads this turn with the Soul Theros in the graveyard. You know, getting the second Courser into play is nice from a life game perspective, but he is opening himself up to a pretty big hit this turn.
Turn over a couple of cards here. Will Andersen, so another zombie's going to come in from SCGC. You mentioned it. It is a pretty big deal.
Because it's such a big commitment in mana for the Aether Spouts that if Riley falls too far behind this turn, then Chris gets in a spot where he can, attack with a fraction of his team, and Aether Spouts is way less efficient.
And the question is, what card do you cast here? The attack was made. Satyr Wayfinder died. And it looks like he's going to go to the skies now.
I want to be in a position where I can make things really awkward for Riley if he holds up Aether Spout's mana. To that end, I want to get Flyers to play, because if he leaves up 5 mana, then you can send with Gesture, Wingmate Rock, and maybe Sidisi, or something like that, where it's just a challenge for Aether Spouts to do very much.
Of course, you're going to gain a little bit of life there off the Pluto Delta. Dig Through Time was the draw. Dissolve is on top of the deck. And of course, Aether Spouts is in hand. Now, we know that Andersen does not just yet. And if Andersen's able to draw some sort of counter spell, it's probably doing okay.
So again, this is big time. Chris is aware of Aether Spouts. Is there a way to win the game inside of time while navigating through that card?
He's certainly going to try. And perhaps it starts here with Wingmate Rock. So here they come. Looks like a zombie token too. But the big trick is, what kind of attack do you make that can cause Riley to Aether Spouts here, so that you can try to kill him over the next couple of turns, because you don't have a ton left. So there is Spouts. Wingmate Rock's going to go back on top. I like playing Soul Theros here. Yep. And just pass the turn back. Dissolve will be the draw here for Riley, assuming that he wants to draw. He can sacrifice one of those fetch lands if he wants to. He's going to sacrifice a Delta, so he'll lose 1, go down to 13 and gain 2, so he's up to 15. And he'll get to control his draw step a little bit here. And it is turn 1 of extra turns now, so Curran will have turns 1, 3, and 5. Andersen will have 2 and 4 to try to get the job done here. So, I don't think it's a game that Riley could win.
I was about to say the same thing. The ship has certainly sailed on Riley winning inside of time. He has to go ultimate with a Planeswalker beat down with Prognostic Sphinx. That's impossible at this stage.
Yeah.
But he may be able to defend himself. He's only got to get through Chris's turn 2 and turn 4.
That's the big plan now, it seems. Looks like Prognostic Sphinx was the draw. Swamp's going to come into play, trigger, gain some life. Of course, they're working overtime. Kiora.
Not important from an ultimate perspective this game, but definitely another piece of defense.
Yeah. Ashiok. Turn a couple over. Wingmate Rock among them. Carry added. And a forest.
And now the question is, is there much to be gained from deploying this Prognostic Sphinx? I suppose Riley believes the answer is yes.
Well, it's time to draw. Rhino's not bad. Because what the turn could be here for Chris is, play Rhino, play Courser, pass, next turn, attack with everything, hope the soul's good enough.
I think that Chris maybe has to do something different, which is just say attack with everyone or close to everyone this turn.
Okay.
Get in a bunch of damage and hope that combat plus the Siege Runner trigger is enough for lethal.
Sure. Here's one. He's got to try something.
Yeah. I think because Riley has access to 3 chump blockers, I think your line of play, Riley's going to be pretty likely to be able to block out of it. On top of that, this is a turn where Aether Spout shields are down, and you don't know if you get another shot at that.
That's true.
So I feel like you have to make a big push inside of combat this turn, hope to do enough damage where next turn Siege Rhino or another attack can finish off the game.
Well, it's time to attack with some stuff. The question is what? Looks like Zombie Token Sidisi along with Soul of Theros want to come to play. Potentially Elvish Mystic as well. Couple of cards and Thoughtseize, Soul, Manic Influence, Zombie Token incoming. So there that is. And there are some blocks. Some damage looks like it's going to come through. Now, will there be a Soul activation? That's the question.
So Soul activation is plus 4 points of damage through the unblocks, which does not put Riley into Siege Rhino range. So I think it makes sense now to post-combat deploy this, hope that Aether Spouts isn't there, and you can just attack for a bunch of damage next turn.
Yeah, and hope it's good enough. Of course, we're going to come in. Chris wants to make sure he has the necessary mana to cast Siege Rhino afterwards. So Theros on top of the deck. There's Rhino. Puts you down to 10. And just maybe, he's got a lot of creatures out there. Turn 3. Curran draws a Kiora. Top card, Carrick Apex Predator.
And dig through time in Riley's hand.
There's the attack. Scry 3. Dissolve. Hero's Downfall and Garrick are the cards he's looking at.
And I really like putting all of them on the bottom right now because I think Riley just needs to give himself the most looks at Aether Spouts.
Yeah. Here's Dig.
Although, again, he is missing quadruple blue. He actually needs to find blue source of mana
And Spouts.
and Aether Spouts.
I think that's going to be a problem. I don't think he's found those. Curiated is 1. He's going to try to gum things up as much as he can now.
Yeah, but Chris has a lot of mana and a lot of knuckleheads to attack with. One of them has trample. I mean, it's going to be a tough block. Now, Riley does have the option of using Ashiok here to get a Wingmate Rock. He's triggered Raid,
Yep.
so that's 2 more blockers. It's going to be real close.
There's a Forest. Gain a life from Courser. Does make you wonder if he's going to see that play.
I have to
Yep.
imagine if he attacked with the Prognosis Sphinx, because it's so valuable as a blocker, the only reason was to get the Wingmate Rock and a Raid trigger.
Yep. So there that is. Plus the ability to put Wingmate Rock plus the Ray Trigger, Kiora to shut down the Rhino, and then play Curiated.
Yeah, you have a lot of blockers. You have Kiora to lock up the Trampler. This is most likely a pass through Chris's 4th and final turn.
And we know Chris's draw step is going to be a Soul. And we'll get to see the top card here in just a moment, which is a copy of Farika. And given enough time, that card would certainly take over the game. And Kiora actually ended up going with Soul instead of Siege Rhino. 2, 3 cards turned over. Zombie Token as Farika is a creature.
Last call to sign up tonight for any of events tomorrow. If you'd like to sign up for any of our events tomorrow, now is the last time to do that for tomorrow.
And this is just a tough way to go out if you're Chris. You know, game 2 got away from you, and it feels like game 3 with a little bit more time, he's got a pretty big advantage.
3 or 4 more minutes.
Yeah.
Just don't think he can force through enough damage at this point. And you see 6 damage to come through. If he elects to activate the Soul, he can push through plenty. So a bunch of creatures are going to die in this situation. Chris is going to calculate, assuming he's activating the Soul, how much life he's going to gain.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's enough to push him safely out of lethal next turn.
I would say so, yes. And there's the mana for the Soul activation. But you can definitely see the frustration on Andersen's face.
Yeah.
He can tell he let this one get away. And what's a very favorable matchup, it seems. And again, given enough time, I think he would win this one. So it's tough to say. Coming into this round, Andersen was in 59th place. Curran was in, I think, 78th, something low down the totem pole. Here's a dig through time. So this might be a situation where Riley will maybe potentially concede because they are good friends. You know, it's going to end in a draw. It's turn 5.
Yeah.
So Chris is at 36. There's no way of working his way through all of this. This is just a really, really tough matchup. So first we'll shake hands, and if we get a result, we'll let you guys know. But we're going to bring it back to the booth here and put a close on today as Chris Andersen and Riley Curran go to the clock and then some in this match.
Yeah, really slow, grinding matchup. I think Chris has a pretty substantial edge there. But again, game 2, I think, was imminently winnable. And I think Chris maybe got a little bit ahead of himself in terms of assuming that he had the game locked up.
Yeah, I think so. And it was definitely back and forth and pretty close. But as you mentioned, I think he just did get a little bit ahead of himself there.
And you can see the look on his face with the second Aether spouts.
Yeah.
There's a point in the game where Chris's hand is something outrageous, like removal spells, Waymate Rock, Soul Theros, Treasure Cruise. And even though he's missing land drops, it seems like it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And if you're